Three, two, one, live stream check.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Martin Warnes, Chair of the Planning Committee, and I will be chairing the meeting. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube page and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. Introductions. I will ask members starting on my left to introduce themselves.
Good evening everyone. I'm Councillor Sam McCarthy representing Shrub End Ward and Deputy Chair of the committee.
Councillor Robert Davidson, Mersey and Playfleet Ward.
Councillor Tracy Arnold, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Catherine Spindler for the Saints Ward.
Councillor Faye Smalls, Old Heath, The Hive and Rowhedge, substituting for Sam McLean.
Councillor Thomas Rowe, Rural North Ward.
Councillor Kayleigh Rippingale, representing Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Councillor Mark Gocher representing Castle Ward.
Councillor Jackie McLean, Markstown Lair Ward.
Councillor Lee Tate for Prettygate Ward.
James Ryan, Planning Manager, South Team.
Lucy Mondon, Planning Manager, North Team.
Daniel Bird, Planning Officer. Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, members and officers, for introducing yourself. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. If necessary, we will have a break at 7:30 p.m. and every 90 minutes afterwards. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. Whilst determination of a planning application is not a quasi-judicial process, unlike certain licensing functions carried out by the local authority, it is a formal administrative process involving the application of national and local policies, reference to legislation and case law, as well as the rules of procedure, rights of appeal, and an expectation that people will act reasonably and fairly. All involved in these decisions should remember that the possibility that an aggrieved party may seek a judicial review and or complain to the Ombudsman on grounds of maladministration or a breach of the authority's code. So, we've already had one apology. We've had apologies from Councillor Mannion and Councillor McLean. Councillor Smalls has informed us that she's substituting for Councillor McLean, and Councillor Rowe is substituting for Councillor Mannion. Thank you. Are there any declarations of... Yes,
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Chair. Could you please, for clarity, explain which McLean you're talking about, please?
Yeah, one is McLean and one is McLean. So I'm talking about Councillor Sam McLean. Thank you.
Sorry, I pronounced it incorrectly, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for that. Pronunciation is important, so thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just formally declare that because I'm the person who've called this in and I've publicly objected in the media to this application, I will be stepping off the committee when item 7.1 comes up and speaking as a ward councillor to ensure the integrity of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Councillor Gocher. Item 4, are there urgent items? There are no urgent items. Have your say, item 5. If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me or on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now. Item 6, minutes of the meeting on the 15th of August 2024 are before the committee for confirmation. Are there any points of of accuracy? If not, can I have a proposer and a seconder? Proposed by Councillor Tate and seconded by Councillor McLean. Got it right, thank you. All those in favour?
That is carried, Chair.
Thank you. I've not voted because I wasn't at the meeting last time, okay? Okay. Item 7. So we have one item before us tonight, 7.1, which is an application number 232754, land east of Albert Street, Colchester. It's an application for 8 dwellings consisting of 4 times 3 bed houses and 4 times 2 bed apartments. And it's recommended for approval. The presenting officer is Daniel Bird. We have one public speaker against, Andrew Jarvis, and no public speakers for, and visiting councillors, in this case, as previously described, Councillor Mark Gocher, and we have Councillor Chifoglu as well. So, can I ask Daniel to present?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application is number 232754 for land east of Albert Street. This application is seeking planning permission for 8 units consisting of 4 3-bedroom dwellings, 4 2-bedroom apartments. The site is located to the south of Margaret Road, with the existing access being utilised and enhanced. The wider context of the site comprises of terrace dwellings to the west facing Albert Street, with detached properties to the east and southeast along Margaret Road and Corston Road. The prevailing character of dwellings within the vicinity feature rear gardens with limited off-street parking associated with the properties. The site is currently largely overgrown, with some areas of hard standing where historically some small buildings were located when the site was used as a builder's yard. Previous application 222460 was refused on this site for highway concerns identified by the Highway Authority. This application has revised the vehicular access arrangement, and the Highway Authority now no longer object to this proposal. These issues are considered to have been overcome. This is the existing site access. Oh, sorry, let me just hide them. Here is the current site conditions. This is the proposed access to the south leading to Corston Road, which would allow refuse and cycle access to the rear gardens of the 3-bed units, as highlighted in blue on the plan adjacent. Hopefully you can see that where my cursor is. Here is the existing and proposed site plan. As you can see, a refuse store is to be located to the site entrance, providing bin storage for the 4 apartment units. There is an area of 89 square metres of communal amenity space adjacent and surrounding the 2-bed units. In addition, covered cycle parking is proposed to accommodate 4 cycles. There is a block of 4 2-bedroom flats to the north of the site, with the 4 3-bedroom units located to the south, separated by the parking area providing 9 spaces in total. As you can see, each 3-bedroom unit features rear gardens enclosed with fencing. In addition, all gardens will feature both refuse and bike storage. These facilities, including refuse collection, would be accessed via Corston Road to the south of the site. Here are the front elevations of the 2-bed flats when viewed from Margaret Road. The 2 first-floor flats feature balconies, with the ground floor units providing an area of defensible space to the front. Here are the elevations of the 3-bedroom dwellings to the south of the site that feature a consistent design language to the flats and wider site context. As you can see, the proposed dwellings do not breach the 45-degree rule or cause overshadowing or reduction in outlook to adjacent premises windows. Here are the proposed floor and roof plans for the 3-bed units, with open plan ground floors with 2 bedrooms to the first floor and 1 bedroom within the roof space. Here are the floor plans of the 2-bed flat units. And here are the elevations for the refuse store, which features a green roof and ample bin storage for the flat units. Here are the details of the bike store, which is a covered and secured provision. Here is a cross-section of the site showing the height of the proposed dwellings in relation to those adjacent. As you can see, there's limited difference in the height compared to the neighbouring properties. Here is the proposed landscape plan, which shows 2 trees to be planted either side of the site entrance, with 5 additional trees on site. In addition, hedging would be used around the boundaries wherever possible, as indicated in green. Finally, officers also propose a slight amendment to the approved plan condition 2 to remove plan 203.03 from the approved list, as it features the now omitted 1-bedroom flat above the site entrance. Condition 4 is include wording to stipulate requirements of communal bin storage and floor treated. Members do have a copy of this in front of them for clarity. Condition 15 amended to secure the access to Corston Road to ensure that it is maintained and remains available for use by the residents of the housing units. There are a number of new conditions proposed also in terms of the communal storage areas, details of a management company and maintenance of the communal storage areas, construction method statement, limits to the hours of work for construction, and provision of 1 EV car parking space, charging point, sorry. As a result of this, my recommendation will be slightly amended to approve the planning permission subject to the signing of a legal agreement under the Section 106 unilateral undertaking. In the event that the legal agreement is not signed within 6 months, I will propose to delegate authority to the head of service to refuse the application or otherwise be authorised to complete the agreement. Delegated authorities also seek to agreement to pre-commencement conditions under the Town and Country Planning Act, Regulations 2018, and to make non-material amendments to planning conditions and Section 106 clauses as necessary. This application is proposed for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, if you want to speak, indicate to my Vice Chair, Sam, and he will give me the running order. So, anyone wants to... Oh, sorry, yep, I've forgotten. My apologies. So we go to the speaker against, which is Andrew Jarvis. Welcome. When you come up to the mic and press it, you will have 3 minutes in which to speak, and the bell will go after 2.
2 and then 3.
And then 3. Over to you.
Okay, I'd like to start out by pointing out there have been numerous objections throughout the I think 4 applications that have been submitted up to now, with the recent one obviously reducing the actual number of dwellings down to 9. However, I will focus on the most salient of concerns, starting with the clear excess of dwellings for the site size. The current proposal equates to 66 dwellings per hectare. This is basically based on the assertion by the developers that this is a city centre development. However, if you look at the local area, this is more in line with a start of conurbation rather than actual city centre. Given that, the national average for this site would actually be closer to 30 dwellings per hectare. So we can already see that it's kind of crammed in. The second most important point would be the parking. So the developers have stated that they're providing 100% parking with the 9 spaces. However, this actually only equates to about 50% of Essex's own guidelines for parking provision. Again, they've based this on the assertion that city centre reduces the need for cars, etc., etc. However, extrapolating the existing number of cars in the local area, this isn't the case, because actually the parking scheme is already oversubscribed. On that point, the North Essex Parking Partnership have already stated that the new development will not be able to take part in the scheme. with reference to the bay size, so the national average or the national requirement is 5.5 metres by 2.9, with an absolute minimum of 5 by 2.5. The proposal is actually only 5 by 2.4 metres, so sub the Essex's minimum requirements to qualify as a parking bay. One of the main points of this was actually preclude or completely prohibit any work vehicles using the parking bays, either as a resident or a visitor. And one of the other omissions by the planning is that Essex requires either 5% or a minimum of one parking space to be suitable for disabled parking. This has not been accounted in the parking proposal. The most important question that needs to be answered for the residents is, given the inevitable overflow of parking, given we know there's about 1.5 cars per dwelling, national average, also the Northern Gateway, University, etc. Okay, what we don't know is where will these excess cars go, given there's literally no space for them. Can I keep? Okay. Additionally, what the other most important point is Albert Street, numbers 12, 13, 14, 15 will have their garden sunlight obstructed by the new development. Also, the existing planning, so Essex guidelines require that there is at least 1 metre distance from an existing boundary to the new building, a building that is basically located 9%, of which it is. The plan is much, much less than this, probably less than half going off the existing planning. So there is less than 1 metre distance from the existing garden boundary to the proposed housing on the western elevation. Looking at the plans, there is no stated distance. It looks like it's within the region of 20 centimetres, maybe even completely butted against the fence. We don't know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now call upon Councillor Colchester. Thank you, Mark, and you will have 5 minutes. The bell will go at 4 and again at 5.
Thank you, Chair. The reason I called the application in is because of the significant concerns expressed by residents. I'll try not to repeat everything. In terms of parking, previous speaker made some of the key points. The fact that there is basically one parking space per dwelling, and realistically, then there may well be more car use than there are car spaces. Given that there's likely to be multiple residents in dwellings. And I agree that in an ideal world, I would love everybody to be more active travelling, walking, cycling, taking public transport. But in a realistic world, we can't compel people to do this as a condition. And in reality, as the previous speaker said, there are lots of employment opportunities that are not in the centre of Colchester, where people may feel they need a vehicle, where the public transport links are not what they should be, and let's face it, they aren't, but that's another matter. It brings back to the key question, where will the cars go when the bays are full? There's also a concern that's been expressed about disabled parking. And the Essex Design Guide suggesting that there should be a minimum of at least one space or 5% that is for disabled persons. Can we please confirm whether at least one of the bays is big enough to be for disabled parking? And that's just a question, really. Another issue is the access from Corston Road, the folly. At the moment, the folly is inaccessible. There's a skip there basically at the moment, but I think the concern really is that there seems to be some confusion about who actually owns this access route, because from some people's reading of the deeds of their properties nearby, it's appearing on their deeds. So I'm thinking particularly the resident number 51, but in terms of ownership of that access folly, who owns it? have we clarified this? Also, in terms of maintaining it, who will maintain the path as a pedestrian and cycle access route, making it, so that it doesn't get overgrown or whatever? Who's going to maintain it? But more importantly, who owns it at the moment? Because that is your access from Corston Road, and if that's not viable, then there may be an issue. On the other side, the access from Margaret Road, at the moment that's a rubble track leading to the gate that leads to the site. So who will be maintaining that rubble track? Will that rubble track be turned into a proper access? Because at the moment it is a rubble track. So can we have some clarification on that? And also there have been quite considerable concerns about the possible loss of sunlight with residents in Albert Road. I had a look, and it does seem like it's going to come close to the boundary of some of these back gardens. And thinking about the way the sun moves round, it'll rise in the east. It look like it might block some of the sunlight in the morning. But can we have the kind of, statistical breakdown of how the conclusion was reached that it won't basically block people's light? Because it does seem to be going very close to the boundaries of the back gardens. And that's a big concern that I have. So it's because of these questions and the density of the proposal. It's quite a big set of flats and houses just behind the back gardens of Albert Road. My concern is about not so much that it's being developed. I don't think anyone has a problem with the development of that site in some form. That's not the concern. The concern is the nature of the design of the development and its imposing nature on the residents, and also, of course, the accessibility and the big concern about the parking issue. Because at the moment, I know the area, and it's jam-packed. It's got a residents' parking scheme that the new development won't be part of. So where are these vehicles going to go if they can't be in the residents' parking scheme? Because, as I said at the start, we've got no means of compelling people not to use cars. I wish we did, but we can't. So those are my questions and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gocher. Now I call upon Councillor Chafoglu to come forward and speak. Thank you. You have 5 minutes and the bell will go at 4 and again at 5.
Right, thank you. I would like to start my speech by saying that parking arrangements for the plan are classified as sub-minimum. Transport Statement 2 heavily criticized objections raised by CHA, claiming none are sustainable and that there are a number of generic refusal reasons which cannot be credibly applied. It also referred objections raised under highway standards as inappropriate, incorrect, and inflexible. Interestingly, while the TS2 criticizes credibility of objections, it is also claiming that when everything is properly considered, there is no material level of vehicle flow produced by this development. I'm sure that members of the panel would agree that a proper consideration is the one that pays attention and gives value to objections sent by residents living in the neighbouring streets who use Serpentine Walk, Coaston Road, Mercer's Way, Margaret Road and Albert Street on a daily basis. Serpentine Walk and Albert Street are already being used as a shortcut to avoid congestion in Coventry Avenue, despite both roads having restrictions and limitations on speed limit and vehicle access. My question is, under the Council's environmental control documents and advisory note for control of pollution during construction and demolition works, all waste arising from the ground clearance and construction process to be recycled or removed from the site subject to agreement with the local planning authority and other relevant agencies. Could panel please clarify if such plan has been provided by the developer, and if this is something that will be negotiated, could the council be mindful of the status and condition and usage of eastern section of Margaret Road? Moving to my next point, I welcome that in the interest of reducing the need to travel by car and promoting sustainable development and transport, prior to occupation, the proposed development mentions that pedestrian and cycle access to the site from Colchester Road is to be provided together with a suitable and all-weather surface. Could the panel clarify who will monitor and enforce this, please? Moving to my next point, in the transport statement number 2, the CHA objections that proposal would lead to additional vehicles being left parked on the adjoining highway, adding to the existing parking stress in this area, causing conditions of congestion, danger, and obstruction contrary to the interests of highway safety, was criticized as not having supportive data. The fact that this development's parking arrangement is not compatible and falls short of Essex and Colchester parking standards, and that there are parking restrictions in neighbouring streets, and that even the rough and neglected western half of Margaret Road is used for parking, are all valid and factual realities that parking aspect of this plan should consider carefully. I believe it is unfair and inappropriate to describe CHA and residents' concerns as dramatic. After reading Transport Statement number 2, I would like to clarify that applicants or those preparing reports for the consideration of offices and planning committee should be very mindful of the wording used to not sound manipulative, speculative, and residents' expectations and concerns shouldn't be simply discarded and described inappropriate, incorrect, and inflexible. Similarly, objections mentioned by the County Highways Authority and LPA should not be described as disappointing. Both residents' concerns and expectations, as well as objections registered by CHA and LPA, deserve and should get a tangible response and consideration rather than disregarded. It is reasonable and fair to bring it to the attention of the panel that the land currently is eligible to turn into a functional builder's yard, and in fact, residents of the area would welcome a less disturbing and residential usage of the land. However, their concerns regarding the usage of the folly and concerns surrounding parking facilities are also valid and deserve a proper consideration and response. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. Well timed. Okay, I'll ask Daniel to respond. On your point about the use of language, I would expect reports to be deadpan and factual in the way they are worded. So could I ask Daniel to answer the points that have been raised by the speakers?
Yep, thank you, Chair. First comment is regarding the parking provision. As has been addressed in the report, the adopted standards are effectively at a maximum level. This is within a highly sustainable location. It's within 600 metres of the Colchester North Station, similar sort of distance to the town centre. So these and the types of units proposed would be self-selecting in terms of people would only move to a two-bedroom flat if, on that basis, something that would be factored in with the decision-making of purchasing a property. In terms of parking provision, there is nothing wrong with that being reduced. That has been assessed appropriately within the report and is concluded that that is acceptable based on the location and the accessibility of the site. In terms of the cramped appearance of the scheme, the number of units are not considered to be excessive in terms of the surrounding development. It should be noted that along Albert Street, the prevailing character are terraced houses, in which case noted their garden sizes are larger, but in terms of actual cumulative building size, it is compatible with the wider context. In terms of the parking sizes comment, I note that the sizes were slightly limited based on the nature of the site. As you can see, based on the proposed site plan, there is limited scope for those to be increased any wider. There is a slight shortfall in the scale of these parking spaces, but on balance, that is considered acceptable in terms of what could be accommodated on the site. In terms of disabled parking provision, that's something that could, obviously there is a visitor space available. That visitor space, as you can see on the end, does have more space to open the car doors and get in and out in terms of anyone that has accessibility issues. So it could potentially be used for that. Again, that in terms of, yeah, so that's all I would add in terms of that currently. Gardens along Albert Street, and in terms of it obstructing the light provision, the dwellings, based on the measurements, they are approximately 16 metres from the boundary, not in the boundary, from the neighbouring dwellings immediately, and they have been assessed under the 45-degree rule. And if I can, am I still sharing? Let me try and, sorry, bear with me, it's easier if I just illustrate this by the plan. This drawing here is shown referencing the dwellings that were referenced by the speaker in terms of the angle proposed between the three-bedroom units and the adjacent property. As you can see, it does not cast over 50% of the centre point of the adjacent window, and in that regard, it is considered policy compliant. And it can also see that in terms of elevation as well from this perspective. In terms of
referring more to the western edge, which
the western edge.
Any gap looking at that
Western edge.
Yeah, thank you, but you've had your chance to speak, and it's for the officers to inform members who will take the decision. Thank you.
I'll clarify that quickly, just to... Sorry. Yes, from the western edge, that is, let me just get the measurement. Yeah, 16 metres going down to 12 metres at the closest point. Again, that's not considered an issue in terms of any overlooking or overshadowing on those properties. The orientation of the site should also be noted in terms of the fact that it is north facing effectively. So in terms of that building, it's not considered to result in material overshadowing to the rear of any of the adjacent properties in that respect. In terms of the ownership of access to Corston Road, that this application has been, a certificate has been signed based by the applicant to suggest that they have ownership of that land. We have no reason to dispute that. In terms of the access that is to be used for refuse for the three dwellings to the south, there is no, that would be retained open, and in terms of the condition, it would still be usable by other residents outside of the development. And I'd just like to clarify in terms of the red line boundary, where that blue section is hashed in the bottom corner, that's not a hard boundary in any way. That would remain open, leading all the way to the front of Margaret Road. In terms of surfacing, in terms of regarding Margaret Road, I take the point the surface is in poor condition. We've obviously attended the site visit this morning, or this afternoon even, and but unfortunately that is an unadopted road, so the applicant is only capable of improving the facilities within their red line boundary, the area that they own effectively. And if you check on this map, this plan that I'm showing currently, you can see the elements that will be improved in terms of the junction being slightly condensed, and the road markings that would clearly enhance that element of the thing. Unfortunately, he can't go any further in terms of Margaret Road because that's not within his ownership effectively. So yeah, that's that one. Recycling waste. Oh, with a comment in terms of recycling of building waste. Obviously, the current site is, there is, as we saw today, there's no structures on the site other than effectively overgrown grassland. And so in terms of removing any of that waste, that's less of an issue because there isn't any. The site was cleared entirely in 2018. In terms of during the building process and post-building, obviously that is at the discretion of the applicant of how they dispose of those, any waste products. But we would hope that anything would be kept to a minimum in that regard. And obviously, in the interest of costs, that usually happens. The surface of Colchester Road access, that is conditioned via condition 15, and the cost of that would be provided via the developer and would be maintained at their expense. Builder's yard, having the site as a previous builder's yard use, obviously it is classed as previously developed land. It has, I'll take the point that it is less, it's a different type of use to the residential use that's proposed here, but in terms of comings and goings, it should realistically be similar in terms of disturbance potentially, because as we all know, builders' yards can cause some serious noise issues. So yeah, at that point, I think that's all I've got from there, Chair. Any other questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Right, we'll go to the speakers. It's been indicated that Councillor Rowe is first and Councillor Smalls will follow.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick clarifying point. I think one of the speakers mentioned that the proposed development was 1 metre from the existing house, and it wasn't. Could you clarify that point? Sorry.
Apologies, that was on my list, but I've missed it. Sorry about that. Yes, just to clarify, in terms of the Essex Design Guide, it does state 1 metre difference, but that is from the rear, not from, per se from the side of the development. So in terms of that, it's not relevant to this proposal in that respect. So yeah, hopefully that clarifies.
Okay, thank you very much. Slightly smaller than they're supposed to be under the regulations. With respect to the existing parking bays around the vicinity in the immediate area, those parking bays in a similar, I mean, what's the difference? Are they small or are they larger than these ones? How are we, what's the size of those existing parking bays, and is it massively out of character?
Apologies. In terms of the surrounding parking infrastructure, they are currently just on-road bays, so effectively there's no size parameters on those, but they are permit restricted between the hours of, let me just double check, just one, between 8 AM and 6 PM, just just for clarity. Sorry, I'll have to quickly get the picture up to remind myself. Yeah, in terms of that, they are literally for residents only. Obviously, it has been clarified that the new development will not be provided any additional permits for wider streets or within the vicinity, hence why it is considered that it can be controlled in that manner, because people can't effectively park elsewhere without that being an addition. And it's worth noting, in terms of the scale of the parking spaces provided on site, they are a 10 centimetre away from the adopted standards. Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate that. One additional question. How many permits are the current households allowed? Do we know that? Like, is it one per house, or is it two, or do we know what the number is? Does it work like that?
Good question. I don't have that to hand. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Rowe, yeah, if we could just try and ask all our questions in one go, so others, as we go round the table, get a chance to speak. Councillor Smalls.
Sorry, I was indicating then to say I've got a pretty good idea about the permits. It's 2 permits per household is the standard, and they're very strict about not going over that. So anyway, I'm in favour of this development. I think it ticks a lot of boxes in terms of sustainability. People can walk to the station, you can walk into town. Obviously, people will want to go to other places, but you've got that basis. There is, appreciate existing residents have got a lot of issues around parking. However, the residential scheme should protect the roads around it. It might be something that the ward councillors and residents want to contact North Essex Parking Partnership to get reassurance and possibly to extend the time limits, because there could be a possible risk in the evening. I think the people who move into these flats and houses, they will be a self-selecting group. They are going to be aware of the parking restrictions. So what would be hopeful is that it might be people who don't currently use a car or who have one car, because they will have to, clearly if somebody chooses to live in that property with 2 cars, it will be down to them to find somewhere, which would probably be having to rent somewhere. I am concerned there isn't a disabled bay, so I'd like you sort of partially addressed that. So I don't know if that is something we could look into, if that is physically possible. Another concern I have is there's only 1 electric charging point. So in terms of future proofing, I don't know if that's something we could encourage to have more electric points. And I like that the cycle storage is factored in as well.
If I just quickly come back on the electric car charging port thing, it's prescribed standards based on 10 units. So obviously, as this is only 8, you have 1 per 10 units effectively. So that is the requirement. So it does meet the requirement in that regard. Yeah. In terms of the sorry, could I just come?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Sorry, in terms of the parking, there might be a couple of options if looking at the site plan. I don't think we've got it up on screen, but there are 8 units being proposed and 9 parking spaces being shown. So that essentially would give 1 parking space per unit and a visitor space. There is a space on, there is some space on the eastern side of approximately 1.2 metres. So that effectively could be used to allow the spaces to be enlarged to get to the 2.5 metre width, or potentially to increase some space. So space 9 would effectively be a disabled parking space, because it would have more room to open doors, etc. So there are a couple of options there that members may wish to prescribe anything in terms of a condition or similar. Just to provide some clarity in terms of the policy background to how we look at parking provision, particularly for residential developments, the parking standards SPD, which is adopted, it does make specific reference to the fact that there is a reductions of the vehicle standard may be, this is about numbers of parking spaces, not sizes, reductions of the vehicle standard may be considered if there is development within an urban area, including town centre locations that has good links to sustainable transport. So just to give some clarity about that, that there is policy background to why this application is being considered in the way that it has been.
Thank you, Lucy. Councillor Rippingale.
So my main concern is the management of the folly, to be honest. It's going to attract fly tipping, is the honest answer. If we're not sure of the ownership, though we're saying we've got a stated, signed, statement. In that case, if the developer does own the land, surely it would make more sense to close it off, because I can see what's going to happen is rubbish is going to get dumped there. There'll be argument between the council and the maintenance company of who will be clearing that rubbish, and then the residents of the new housing and of the surrounding areas will be struggling, because it's a fact. It is going to happen. I live in an urban area. I have a lot of follies. I have a lot of fly tipping. So I think, one, we need to clarify the ownership. Two, we need to establish whether actually that access point being open is a sensible idea from practicalities. If it's going to be a refuge run for those houses, I'm not content and also with these follies and these back alleys, there's always discussion about ownership. We have it in Newtown. So I think we really need to clarify that and get some more firm proposals around whether that should actually be an open access, because I don't want us to approve this and then we have an issue where the council is saying we're not clearing it because it's private land, but then we're saying it's an open walkway. So I think we really need to clarify that point before we move forward. If we are not able to provide the right size parking spaces as well, my discussion would be, is there too many units on the site if they're not wide enough? I know that we're saying it's only 10 centimetres, but as a person who has to get a buggy in and out of a car and a child seat, 10 centimetres is actually quite a lot. And given that there's 3-bedroom houses on this site, one would assume that families are going to be purchasing this. But the practicality is, yes, you can have one car, and I agree. And I'm having the same discussion in my household about getting rid of a car because I live in a sustainable location. But getting a car seat and a buggy out of that car with 10 centimetres less is, not something you think about until you have to do that. Also, the provision of a disabled space should be a given on that site. I don't think we should even be having a discussion that, it could be this space. So I'd really prefer to see that actually planned in and not relying on the developer. But I do think we need to question it. If we can't fit the correct parking size on the site, is there too many units on the site, even by one? So that's my comment.
Yeah, as Lucy alluded to, there are options in terms of a rearrangement of the parking provision. It could, in fact, based on the size as it is in excess of a metre, you most likely be able to squeeze that in there. In terms of the access from Corston Road, completely understand there are concerns in terms of fly tipping and things like that. Absolutely. The way that the wording of the condition is laid out is to allow the potential for that to be closed off via a gate or something like that to allow access to just those residents to stop, hopefully mitigate that issue potentially. And that's something we could, obviously look into on a case-by-case basis. I think Lucy's raised something as well.
Of course, Lucy, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as I mentioned, there's 8 units proposed and 9 spaces. So we're already considering a reduction in the number of spaces because of the sustainable location. So space 9 effectively is a visitor space. If there was a particular concern about having larger spaces and at least one of them being a disabled space, you could effectively take the space being taken up by space 9, and you could have the wider spaces plus disabled. So I think there's scope to modify the parking in order to get a disabled space, although it would mean losing the visitor space. But then again, this being a very sustainable location, that might come into play in terms of considering those options. With the access to Corston Road, the application form included an ownership certificate for the redlined site to state that the applicant has ownership of the application site, and then the access down to Corston Road is marked in blue, which indicates that they have control or access over that land. If members were so minded, we could suggest that you allow us delegated authority to actually interrogate that further to ensure that the applicant does have rights and ownership, and we could also secure some management plan for that area and potentially how it would be dealt with in terms of a gate perhaps that would allow access to the residents, depending on any kind of leasehold rights or any rights of way that are relevant. So we could go away and address that point if members would like us to.
Personally, I think that we should, because I just don't want to set us up for a problem further down the line, which is going to cost the council money. You know, I see it every day in Newtown. So I don't, and especially as that's a similar build type, I don't want us to create ourselves problems. I think we need to be very clear on, given that, you know, members of the public have said that there's questions over that ownership, I think we should make sure that we have all that, you know, lined up before we even go down this road of approval.
Thank you. Can I remind all present that this is a meeting, and if you wish to speak, can you come through the chair, please? Okay, I'm not indicating any other speakers. The only question I wanted to raise was one I raised at the SIGN meeting. I can see there is a communal communal space for the flats, and again drawing on my experience of housing management, I noticed there's a plan to manage the communal bin area, but I don't see a plan to manage this communal space. And you could end up in a situation where there's disagreement amongst those that end up occupying the premises as to how that landscaping should be. So I wondered whether it would be appropriate to have a landscape plan in the consent, so and some discussion about how that is maintained. I mean, given the small number of flats, it may be something of which residents are expected to maintain, or it may be that if there's a management company managing the communal bin store area, they would also take on the management of that green space, and that would mitigate any neighbour disputes that can turn into antisocial disputes at a later stage. Okay, I have indication that Councillor Rowe wishes to speak again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to Councillor Rippingale's point around the folly and the answer to it, if this was to be like, how does the process work? So, like, if we vote on this evening and say, yes, we're happy for this to go ahead, and we delegate those powers, and the developer turns around and says that, I don't know, they don't want to hold the access, right? You know, how does that work? And do we find ourselves in a situation where we're delegating the power to you in order to reject that in the instance that they don't deliver what we voted on and what we've asked you to deliver? Just for clarification.
Thank you. Lucy, you've indicated you'd like to respond.
Yes, Robert might correct me if I'm wrong or need to include anything else, but essentially I think there's some options. You could grant us delegated authority to resolve the matter, but with a requirement that if it cannot be achieved, then we either refuse or take it back to committee. We could do it that way, or you could require us to. You could defer the item, and we could go away and come back, and actually you would see what we've achieved and discuss that then. So there's two options as to whether you want to give us delegated authority to carry it through, or bring it back to committee regardless. But the caveat would be we wouldn't go away with delegated authority and then do away with the access, and you'd be none the wiser. If that makes sense.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I think with the situation we're in at the moment and with the public that are very nervous about this and not too sure how it works or what's going to happen, I think we need to get it in black and white and actually just drill it down to exactly what everybody wants. Thank you.
So is that proposal for a deferral?
Yes.
Seconder? Unless anyone wants to debate that or put it to the vote. Davidson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd also support the deferral, but a couple of points I'd like to make. Obviously, we're concerned about the size of the parking spaces. I'm more worried about collecting refuse from the site. I mean, because the flats will be a trade waste. How are they getting in and out when people have got caravans or other things, or visitors even? But then moving on from that, there's room for 8 bicycles. In the modern world, a lot of them are electric bikes now, and those are being stored inside under the stairs. What risk to the fires are they going to create? And is that really safe for an upstairs flat to have cycles ablaze underneath them? And the other thing I was just going to mention was there are only 8 units, not 9 units, but actually that's 15 bedrooms, but actually 25 beds in those. You know, so that just compounds the amount of pressure for parking or other ways of getting out from that site. And I'm amused by the fact that the developers agreed to give each unit 6 one-day vouchers for local transport. It's not going to last long, is it? Thank you.
Right, so unless officers want to clarify anything Robert said, I will.
I'll just say,
ahead, yeah.
sorry, in terms of the voucher thing, that was requested via the Highway Authority, which is a standard condition, so indeed.
Okay, thank you. So I see James wishes to speak. Come in, James.
So I just think the idea is to get people using the public transport, and then they will then pay for it themselves, and that's how to encourage it.
Thank you. So if we could try and nail down the wording, I'll ask Robert if he could lead on that.
If you're happy, Chair, I've got a start, if that's helpful.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us what the start is?
So the start is that the application is deferred with authority delegated to the Joint Head of Planning to seek amendments to the parking provision to enable the creation of a disabled parking space in place of the visitor space and to expand the width of the spaces where possible. And the second part was and that further information is requested regarding the status of ownership of the folly onto Colchester Road, and to provide further details on the blocking up or fencing of that onto Corson Road. I'll just look to my planning colleagues for any comments on that, if that's helpful.
Any comments? No, you're all saying no, okay. And I asked whether we could include into the management company's responsibilities the green space and landscaping. Okay, so could we have a vote on that, please? All those in favour?
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, members, and that concludes the business this evening. Thank you.